The old man took the form of the wind, traveling from the top of the tree, sweeping across the land, soaring through the trees, over the rivers, until he reached the tortoise hut. Peeking inside, the wind eyes widened in surprise and disappointment. There sat the tortoise, lounging comfortably, surrounded by bags of food. Tortoise hummed to himself as he chewed lazily on a piece of roasted potato, clearly enjoying his solitude and abundance. Furious, the wind busted through the hut, sending the food bags fluttering and the curtains flying. Tortoise jumped in surprise, dropped his potato. "Tortoise!" the wind bellowed, his voice echoing like a storm. "Where is the food you promised the little bird and her chicks? Have you forgotten our deal?" Tortoise's eyes darted around nervously, but quickly, his sly mind began to work. He knew if the wind abandoned him now, he would never survive the last days of the contest, and he had 2 more days to go. Putting on his most innocent face, Tortoise bowed his head. "Ah, wise wind," he began softly. "Please do not be angry. It is not what it seems." The wind voice was sharp. "Not what it seems? You sit here with enough food to feed a village, while the little bird and her chicks starve." Tortoise sighed dramatically, shaking his head. "This food? It is but a small portion. The greedy King Apata has given me so little each day, barely enough for myself. He is withholding the true prize until the contest ends." The wind was growing impatient, but he listened. "Go on," he said. The tortoise nodded eagerly. "You see, the king knows that if I win, I will take his crown and his wealth. He is giving me scraps, hoping that I give up before the final day. But that is why we must stay strong. Once we win on the 7th day, he will have no choice but to hand over all the food and the riches he hoards. And when that happens, I will give the little bird and her chicks more than just 30%. I will give them even more than they need." The wind's eyes softened. After the tortoise gave his reasons, "So, you said the true reward comes on the last day?" "Yes, wise wind," the tortoise nodded earnestly. "He even promised to take some grains of rice and wheat to the bird and her chicks, all in a bid to pacify the angry wind." Then he pointed out, "If you leave me now, we will lose everything. But if you stay, we will win more than you can imagine. I beg you, just 2 more days." The wind sighed deeply. He glanced towards the iroko tree where the little birds waited. Well, the tortoise had promised to bring some food to the birds, so maybe he didn't need to unleash his anger on the tortoise, but the promise of a greater reward gave him pause. "Very well then," the wind said at last. "But remember, tortoise, promises are not meant to be broken. If you fail me, my wrath will be unlike any storm you have ever faced." "I understand," the tortoise whispered, a hidden smile tucking at the corner of his mouth. "We will win together." And with that, the wind swept back to the tree, leaving the tortoise to continue his game. But deep down, the wind's warning echoed through the hut, and Tortoise knew that the final day would be more challenging than ever. Just 2 days left, he said to himself. However, he never planned to share his win with anyone. He could not keep a promise to save his own life. By the 6th day of the contest, the once lean and cunning tortoise had grown noticeably rounder. His shell seemed tighter, his steps slower, and his belly fuller from days of feasting alone. Each night after the contest, he snuck back to his hut with a bag of food, eating to his heart's content, while the rest of the animal kingdom starved. Yet, even with his growing greed, Tortoise remained confident. After all, the wind was still by his side. With every challenge, the routine remained the same. 3 taps on the bag, and a cool breeze would sweep through, making the boiling hot peppery soup bearable. And so, on the 6th day, Tortoise once again triumphed. But while the tortoise savored in his victories, King Apata grew restless. Each passing day, his confidence shrank, and by the 6th day, he could barely sit still. His servants had scoured every corner of the land for the most vicious spices, yet Tortoise remained undefeated. The king's nights were sleepless, his dreams haunted by the thought of losing his crown to a sluggish tortoise. As night fell, Tortoise quietly gathered his day winnings, stacking bags of yams, cassava, and rice into his back. He waited for the cover of darkness to sneak back to his hut, but as he tiptoed through the trees, the wind unseen followed him silently. The wind had grown suspicious, wondering why the little bird and her chicks still waited hungrily at the tree each day. When the tortoise reached his hut, he hummed himself as he arranged his food in a neat pile. Just as he was about to settle in for another night of feasting, a sudden gust of wind blew open his door, knocking over baskets of potatoes. "Tortoise!" The wind's voice rolled through the hut. "Where is the food for the little bird and her chicks? I have waited patiently, but each day you grow fatter while they grow weaker." Tortoise, flustered, tried to gather his words. "Ah, wind, my friend, I, I was just about to take some food to them tomorrow morning. Truly, honestly, I was about to take some food to them." But the wind was not convinced. "Tomorrow? Always tomorrow. That was the same thing you told me yesterday. Your belly grows round with greed, while my family starves. I have helped you every day, and yet you have given them nothing." The tortoise desperately tried to calm the wind. "Please, wind, it's only one day left. One day. Tomorrow is the final contest. Once I win, I will give them everything. I promise. Just help me one last time." The wind swirled angrily around the hut, blowing and scattering the hut to reveal all the hidden spots the tortoise had hid all the food. "No! I am tired of your empty promises. Tortoise, I see your greed clearly now. You never intended to share. You have used me for your selfish gain." The tortoise's heart began to pound. "No, no, please. Don't leave me now. Without you, I cannot win." The wind voice softened, but it was filled with disappointment. "You had the chance to do what was right, but you have failed. I will not be used any longer." With that, the wind vanished into the night, leaving the tortoise alone in his hut, surrounded by food but filled with dread. He realized too late that his greed had cost him the only chance at winning the final contest. But instead of doing what was right by taking some food to the bird, the tortoise, stubborn as ever, scoffed. "Who needs the wind anyway?" he muttered to himself. "Most of the work had already been done. 6 days are behind me. Just one day left. Just one. I can finish the contest on my own." But as the night wore in, doubts began to creep into his thoughts. What if the final pot of soup was now hotter than ever before? What if the king, now desperate, had prepared something no creature could endure? The wind had always been there to save him at the last moment, with a gentle breeze to take away the unbearable heat. Nonsense! I am Tortoise, cleverer than all animal, smarter than the king himself. I have come too far to lose now. His eyes flickered towards the corner of the room, where the wind's bag of air sat still and silent. The wind had warned him not to call on it again, but the tortoise grinned slyly. "Warning are for fools. The wind is gone, but the bag is still here. Why waste such a good thing?" Without a second thought, the tortoise grabbed the bag of air and tucked it under his shell, determined to carry it with him to the final contest. "Tomorrow," he whispered, a mischievous glint in his eyes, "I will win. Wind or no wind, I must claim my victory." The seventh and final day arrived, the day that would decide everything: the king's crown, the fate of the animals, measure of 10% of food, and the legacy of the cunning tortoise. The entire animal kingdom gathered at the king's court, the tension so thick that it could be sliced with a knife. King Apata, usually proud and boastful, sat on his grand throne, nervously biting his fingers. His servants had scoured every inch of the land for the fiercest spices, the hottest peppers, and the most blistering ingredients to create a pot of soup, so fiery it seemed to bubble like a lava. There was nothing left to add. They had exhausted every resource they had. The tortoise, on the other hand, stood tall, though his heart pounded wildly in his chest. He forced a smug smile, masking his growing anxiety. The wind was gone, and all he had left was the forbidden bag of air hidden under his shell. He had no choice now but to rely on it. "Let the final contest begin," the king announced with a trembling voice. The boiling pot was placed directly over the fire, flames slicking the sides of the bubbling broth. Tortoise stepped forward, forcing his nerves down, ready to face the final challenge. With all eyes on him, Tortoise picked up the first spoonful of the burning soup, trying his best to appear calm and confident. He knew that this was the moment that defined everything. Tortoise, with sweat already forming on his brows, secretly tapped on the bag of air under his shell. But to his horror, nothing happened. No gentle breeze, no cool wind, nothing. The bag remained still and silent. Panic surged through him, but Tortoise knew better than to let his fear show. His mind raced. If the wind won't help me, I will have to help myself. Tortoise smiled at the crowd and raised his spoon dramatically. "Before I begin," he said, stalling for time, "let us all reflect on the greatness you have all witnessed these past 6 days." The animals, eager for any distraction from the tension, leaned in curiously. "Have you seen me shed a single tear?" the tortoise asked, holding up a spoonful of the steaming fiery soup. As the animals shook their heads and replied no, Tortoise quickly blew softly on the soup, disguising as though it was a thoughtful pause. "And tell me," Tortoise continued, bringing the spoon closer to his mouth, "since I have been here, have you ever heard me blow on my food to cool it down? Like this?" The animals thought for a moment and responded in unison, "No, never. No, never." As they answered, the tortoise took this opportunity to blow gently on the soup again, all while maintaining a confident smile. He brought the spoon to his lips, but the moment the soup touched his tongue, his throat tightened, and he felt the intense heat clawing at him. "Have you seen me coughing like this?" the tortoise asked, suddenly pretending to demonstrate, while letting out series of loud, exaggerated coughs. The animals chuckled, taking the cough as part of his storytelling flair. They failed to notice that these were all real coughs, triggered by the spiciness, perfectly timed to release the unbearable heat from his mouth each time he exhaled. As the crowd listened intently, Tortoise continued his tale, cleverly waving in exaggerated gestures and pause that allowed him to cool down each bite. Spoon by spoon, cough by cough, he tricked them all. The other animals, too focused on his words, never suspected that the tortoise's theatrical performance was his greatest trick yet. With each spoonful, Tortoise kept them entertained, asking questions, cracking jokes, and boasting about his undefeated streak. All the while, he skillfully used every pause, cough, and laugh to ease the burning in his mouth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Tortoise looked down and realized he had done it. The pot was empty. The animals cheered widely, none the wiser to his clever deception, while the king's face turned pale with shock. Tortoise had finished the hottest pot of soup ever made. Not a single soul realized how. Finally, after days of struggle, the greedy King Apata's reign was about to come to an end. The animals, tired of hunger and oppression, chanted louder and louder, urging the king to hand over the crown. King Apata, in disbelief, wiped away tears of frustration. His servants stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The crown felt heavier than ever on his head as he reluctantly rose to hand it over. "I cannot believe this." Defeated by a sluggish tortoise, he muttered under his breath. But just as the king extended his hand, ready to surrender his crown, a sudden gust of wind swept through the arena with an airy force. The animals gasped, clutching their furs, feathers, and tails as the wind swirled around them like a small tornado. The wind landed gracefully in the center of the arena. The cheering stopped. Silence fell over the crowd as they stared in awe. "Enough!" The wind's voice echoed like the thunders. His sharp gaze locked onto the tortoise. "I warned you not to bring the bag of air, yet here you are, ignoring my words and deceiving all who trusted you." Before the tortoise could protest, the wind raised his hand. A strong breeze blew through the arena, and suddenly, the bag of air under the tortoise shell came loose. It flew up the air, spinning uncontrollably, releasing bursts of air as it unraveled, allowing the wind to escape through the opening. The animals were dumbfounded. "A cheat," the wind declared. "All this time, Tortoise endured the heat. He used me and my gifts to cool down the soup and trick you all." The cheering stopped. The joy disappeared. All eyes turned to the tortoise, who stood frozen. Wait! I can explain," the tortoise stammered. "I worked hard too. It wasn't just the wind." But the animals, now furious, walked towards him. "You tricked us," roared the lion. "You let us starve while you eat in secret," cried the rabbit. Even the gentle deer stomped her hoofs angrily. The tortoise began to back away slowly. But before the tortoise could escape, the animals swarmed him, stomping on his back with their paws, hooves, and claws. Not enough to hurt him badly, but enough to break his pride and greediness. The animals stomped mercilessly on his shell, leaving cracks on his once smooth shell. The animals scampered away from the tortoise, leaving him humiliated and flattened while laying helplessly on the ground. King Apata's face lit up with joy. His crown still sat firm on his head, and with a triumphant grin, he laughed out loudly. "I keep my throne," he bellowed. "And now, back to collecting my harvest. Hunger or not, my storehouses must stay full." The animals groaned in despair, realizing that they were back to where they started. But before the king could celebrate further, the wise old man raised his staff above his head, and with a mighty strike to the ground, the earth trembled. A fierce wind howled through the kingdom, growing stronger and stronger until a massive barrier of air formed between the animals and the human. The animals gasped as the land began to split. Rivers, forests, and hills shifted, creating a great divide. "No longer shall animals be ruled by humans," the old man declared. "From this day henceforth, animals will govern themselves, and humans shall rule over their own kind." The animals cheered with relief as they were finally free from King Apata's tyranny. As the animals settled in their new kingdom, the tortoise, ashamed and battered, tried to repair his cracked shell. He found some okra plants, boiled them into a slimy mixture, and used the sticky okra water to patch his shell. But no matter how much he tried, the cracks never fully disappeared. His once smooth shell remained damaged and rough forever, a permanent reminder of his greed and deceit. And that is why till this day, the tortoise shell is cracked, and why animals live freely in their own world, far from the rule of humans. The moral lesson of this story is the importance of keeping one's promise. Tortoise's failure to keep his promise to the wind cost him dearly. Honoring one's commitments builds trust, while breaking promises leads to loss of support and harsh consequences. The tortoise's greed and selfishness caused him to lose everything. Sharing and thinking of others ensures harmony and prosperity, while greed isolates and ultimately ruins even the cleverest of individuals. And although the tortoise was clever, his dishonesty and selfishness eventually exposed him. Deceit may bring temporary success, but the truth will always come to light because dishonesty leads to shame and lasting damage. Thank you for watching. See you next time.